It's the last night of August 1977, around 9:30 in the evening, when the knocking starts. It's a weird knocking sound, one that seems to be coming from inside the walls. Everyone in your family is unsettled by it, and they all solemnly swear it's not them doing it. Then, as you attempt to investigate, a heavy set of drawers spontaneously slides across the room as though shoved by an invisible intruder. You push it back into place, only for the same thing to happen again. Quite naturally, you grab your things and flee next door, and your next door neighbours very helpfully call the police. A couple of local coppers turn up and are stumped. They search the house from top to bottom and find no intruder. Not only that, but they also hear the mysterious knocking sound and also witness a chair sliding across the floor, seemingly of its own accord. This, they tell you with a big shrug, is one for the scientists, not the police. Then they leave you to it, and you head back to bed in what you are now more or less convinced is a haunted house. This, in short, is the sequence of events which the Hodgson family experienced on the 31st of August 1977, and which later became known the world over as the very first appearance of the Enfield poltergeist. Before we go any further, let's set the scene. This all took place at 284 Green Street in Enfield, a leafy and pleasant suburb in North London. Fun fact, Enfield was the home of the first ever cash machine and the UK's first mass-produced dishwasher. Living at 284 Green Street at the time was Peggy Hodgson, a single mother with 4 children, 13-year-old Margaret, 11-year-old Janet, and 2 other kids who don't feature much in the story, so you can just forget about them. Shortly after the haunting began on that August night in 1977, the family were also joined by 2 investigators from the Society for Psychical Research. Maurice Grosse, inventor of the rotating billboard and owner of a thoroughly magnificent moustache, and Guy Leon Playfair, author of The Flying Cow and owner of some thoroughly magnificent eyebrows. It was thanks to their diligent work that we have so much detail on everything that went down over the 18 months of the haunting. But what did the poltergeist actually do during all that time? Well, it was busy, to say the least. Maurice Grosse later said he'd noted down around 2,000 separate incidents of paranormal activity at the house. Here are a few of the highlights. Toys and other objects were repeatedly thrown across rooms, sometimes hitting people hard enough to leave marks. Both Janet and Margaret were forcibly levitated out of their beds at night. Knocking and shuffling sounds were heard coming from inside the walls of the house. The disembodied voice of an old man spoke openly with investigators, telling them that he died of a hemorrhage in a chair in the living room. Objects routinely phased through walls, went missing or turned up in strange places. Janet was found asleep on top of an old-fashioned radio rather than in her much more comfortable bed, and said that she had no idea how she got there. The ghost wrote obscene messages on the wall, sometimes using obscene substances. Things disappeared. Spoons were bent, furniture was overturned, a stove was wrenched away from the wall, chairs fell over. The girls were tipped out of bed again and again. A curtain wrapped itself around Janet's neck like it was trying to strangle her, and the angry spirit even tried to burn down the house by starting several small fires. Gosh, that all sounds rather stressful, doesn't it? The media certainly thought so. The story was covered at the time in a series of eyebrow-raising reports in the Daily Mirror, and has made an appearance in pretty much every newspaper that's ever had a slow news day since. This massive influx of attention led to a massive influx of psychics, exorcists, journalists, and paranormal investigators flocking to the house, determined to either prove, disprove, or bring to an end the existence of the troublesome spook. But was there even really a problem? Were they all deluded? Was there really a poltergeist causing havoc at 284 Green Street all that time? Or was it all just a series of childish pranks gotten out of hand? When you take a closer look at a lot of the activity, it's impossible not to notice that almost everything involves Janet or Margaret in some fashion. Skeptics have, quite reasonably, pointed out that on close examination it does basically seem like the girls might be responsible for most of it. The objects that were thrown, for example, were often thrown when one or other of the girls was in the general vicinity. Nobody ever saw them throw anything, but it never happened when they weren't around. Ditto for the disembodied voice. It would always emanate from Janet's general direction, which led to a lot of faffing around trying to decide if the voice was actually coming from her. This was a tricky question at first, because at first it would never speak when anyone was looking directly at her. When it finally got over its stage fright, and did speak on camera, it was quickly noticed that the voice was indeed coming from Janet. So, the disembodied voice was now definitively embodied. But was it Janet speaking, or something speaking through her? Investigators noted that it did seem to have a lot of her mannerisms, and was interested in a lot of the same things as she was. For example, the day Janet started her period, the spirit, ostensibly the ghost of an elderly man, had a suspiciously large number of questions about menstruation. But what about the objects that pass through solid walls? Well, when you actually read the reports, it turns out nobody witnessed them passing through a wall. They just noticed the object in one room, then later on noticed it in another room, and for some reason concluded that it must have gotten there by phasing through a wall, rather than by, well, someone moving it? And the levitation? Surely that was an angry spirit from beyond the grave. Well, maybe. But then when you look at the one picture that was taken during a levitation attack, you have to admit that it really, really, really looks like the girl's just jumping off the bed. The attempts at arson? They only started after a journalist told Janet that poltergeists often tried starting fires. The dirty protests? Well, that was definitely human, since as far as we're aware at the moment, ghosts don't poop. And similar to the things that were thrown, one or other of the girls was generally nearby whenever furniture upended itself. On top of all this, the girls were caught faking things several times. Bending spoons, moving objects around the house, and throwing themselves out of bed. They freely admitted that they'd been pranking investigators every time they were caught, but also insisted that everything else was totally real. But that leads us to the much pointier question of why on earth the girls would fake anything, let alone everything. The most common refrain is that they did it for attention. And sure, people have done stranger things for attention over the years. But this was 1977. Internet clout wasn't yet a driving force in human behaviour. The girls, if indeed it was them doing the haunting, didn't do it for attention. But one theory goes, perhaps they did it because of attention. When the haunting started, Janet was just 11 years old. Try to remember what it was like to be 11 years old. And now imagine being 11 years old and surrounded by adults who are all telling you that your house, and maybe even you yourself, are haunted by a malicious spirit. Imagine that national newspapers are reporting the same thing. Imagine that adults are lining up to experiment on you, interview you, exercise you, hypnotize you. Imagine that yes, you did fake some of it as a joke. But now stuff is happening that you're not faking. Maybe it's your sister. Or maybe it is you. But you're not doing it deliberately, exactly. Because sometimes you really do feel the impulse to throw a Lego brick or hide a tape recorder or speak in a funny voice. And when you follow that impulse and throw the brick or hide the tape recorder or speak in the funny voice, all the grown-ups around you say that it's the poltergeist. So maybe it is the poltergeist. Maybe that impulse was, indeed, the poltergeist acting through you. All the grown-ups say it's the poltergeist. The newspapers say it's the poltergeist. Your own family say it's the poltergeist. Well then, maybe it is. You're 11 years old. You're the centre of a gigantic psychic storm of attention. How are you supposed to know what's you and what's the poltergeist? You can't. It's impossible. You are the poltergeist, and the poltergeist is you. Spooky, eh? To this day, Janet and Margaret insist that what happened to them was real. And nobody can dispute that. The events at the house in Enfield were real. But whether they were caused by an angry ghost, a series of pranks, or the huge amount of pressure from the various grown-ups involved is up for debate. All we know is that the strange happenings did eventually stop, shortly after the third or fourth exorcism. In the years since then, books have been written, movies have been made, and the Enfield poltergeist has attained an almost legendary status. The Hodgsons no longer live at 284 Green Street, though the house still stands. If the current occupants are being bothered by a ghost at all, they're remaining heroically quiet about it. So what do you think? There's no doubt that a lot of very weird stuff happened at this unassuming North London house in the 1970s. But was it a poltergeist or something more mundane? You decide. Bye!